episode of the Rise to Reign podcast. I'm your host, Amy Killingsworth, and in this episode, we are talking about pillar number 4, which is integrity. So, integrity is a word that is thrown around a lot, so you might already have a lot of ideas about what integrity is, but we use it in a very specific sense in the Rise to Reign process and framework. So first, let's define it. Integrity defined is the quality or condition of being whole or undivided, and so completeness. Remember, we say that the outcome of Rise to Reign is being healed so you can wholeheartedly live your purpose and love your life. So integrity is really, really, really key and really critical for that. So when I say integrity, it almost always triggers shame because we think of all the ways that we maybe haven't had integrity in the past or that we might be out of integrity in our life. And so I don't want you to do that. I'm just going to invite you to be curious and just listen and see how this can apply to your life and maybe how it can bring you more peace and more completion and more righteousness and more joy. So for Rise to Reign purposes, integrity means the inside matching the outside, or telling the truth without manipulation in all situations. So the inside matching the outside and telling the truth in all situations, no matter, without manipulation. So in order to talk about integrity, we have to talk about the way that we handle our feelings. I know that I come back to this in every single pillar because Rise to Reign is really a framework at its heart. It's a framework of emotional healing, or really life healing. But our emotions, the quality of our emotions is the quality of our life. So how we feel is whether or not we're happy. And how we feel, our emotional state, determines the types of relationships that we attract and the types of jobs that we get and the types of clients that we get, or whether we get clients or whether we're lonely. So it's really, really important to be emotionally healthy, emotionally mature, and emotionally intelligent. So in order to have the conversation about integrity, we have to talk about the ways that we handle our feelings, because this is when we get out of integrity, when we handle our feelings improperly or poorly. So there's 3 ways that you handle your feelings: suppression, expression, and escape. So those 3 ways are suppression, expression, and escape. And I'm going to go through them one by one, and then I'm going to tie it all together and how to live in the light, how to live in truth, and how to live in integrity. So suppression is the most common way that we push feelings down or we put them aside. We just, I talked about how when we feel shame, we want to project it off onto other people or other situations. We want to just get it off of us. And that happens through a process of blame. So this is the most common. We don't like bad feelings. We don't like uncomfortable feelings. We don't like to be uncomfortable. So we try to get out of those feelings by just getting away from them. And it doesn't work. So there's a subcategory of suppression, which is repression. And repression happens unconsciously when something is so bad or so traumatic that your nervous system literally can't deal with it. And your nervous system files it away. You might even not have any memory of it. This happens a lot to children, because when children experience a trauma that they have no grid or way of processing, they file it away in their nervous system. It doesn't go away, but it is yanked out of the conscious and buried in the subconscious. But the problem is that feelings buried alive never die. So I want you to remember that. Feelings buried alive never die. Burying feelings is not a solution. Suppression, however, happens consciously. And we get in such a pattern, we get in such a rhythm, we get in such a habit of suppression that it seems to happen unconsciously, but it is an actual choice to turn away from It's a split second where we turn away from that feeling and either project it or stuff it down. And what I want to train you to do is to stay in the truth of that feeling without either projecting it off or stuffing it down, and to feel it and let it move through you. So feelings will move through you. They don't last forever. You feel them, you acknowledge them, and you let them release. So we don't want to get them stuck in the toxic tank. We don't want them stuck and hardwired into our nervous system, because that's where all kinds of unhealthy addictions and patterns develop. So not only do we want to deal with the feelings as they're coming in and day out, moment after moment, we're having a human experience and we're, having all sorts of feelings during the day. We want to be able to deal with those in real time. But when something triggers something from the past, and that starts to come up, we want to see that as an opportunity to clear out some of the stuff that was suppressed or repressed when we didn't know any better. And in order to do that, we need to become conscious in our triggers, and we need to deal with our feelings differently than maybe we were trained to deal with them in our home or in a school setting. And we need a better way. We need a different way. We need to teach our children a different way, because suppressed feelings and repressed feelings are causes of all kinds of irritability, depression, and even physical symptoms and illness. So remember that the emotional body, thoughts and feelings are actual real things. They can be measured with scientific instruments. They're real in your body. There's chemicals involved to them. There's frequencies involved in them. And so they create a physical reality in your body. And if you don't believe me, just think about when somebody comes out. My children love to jump out from behind the stairwell and, rah, and scare me. I hate it. They love it. But what happens, your heart starts beating fast, and your stomach clenches. Or when you get a phone call and you get some bad news, you feel that dread pooling in your stomach. Or when you're getting ready to give a presentation and you have butterflies in your stomach. And that just is because of the thoughts that you're having and the feelings associated with them. So over time, that's a normal interplay. But over time, when you have these feelings festering and buried under the surface, they can cause some real problems, like serious problems, like tumors and autoimmune disease and heart disease. Feelings buried alive are at the root of many, 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 maybe even most serious illnesses. Certainly mental illness, depression, anxiety, ADHD, neurological disruption, Alzheimer's. Certainly if it has to do with the thoughts and feelings and the mechanism of the central nervous system, it is affected. So we want to be really good. We want to get really good at doing our emotional hygiene through forgiveness, which I've covered extensively. But in order to even do forgiveness, we have to be honest. We have to be truthful. And the only way to build trust and have trust in our relationships is also to be truthful. We want to be the same in every situation. We want people around us to be able to know how we're going to respond and react, and not in a bad way. We want to be level. We want to be even. We want the inside to match the outside. So inside we want to have righteousness, peace, and joy, and that's what we want to manifest on the outside. So we want to be that presence as the king or the queen who puts other people at ease, who is able to hold their emotional state when everything around them is falling apart. That's a true leader. In order to have that, you have to have a very firm emotional foundation. And you have to have the inside matching the outside, which means that you can't solve an internal problem by external means. You can't solve an internal problem by external means. This goes back to projection. So one of the things that I hear from especially women a lot is that they really, really, really want to meet their counterpart or their divine match or their soulmate. and they want it and they can't think of anything else, and they think they can't be happy until they meet this person. Well, what do they attract? Somebody who's codependent, somebody who's really controlling, somebody who is coming into a situation to complete them when they don't need to be completed. They attract something completely different than what they want because of the emotional state that they're in when they're attracting and choosing a partner. So that's an attempt to solve an emptiness or a sadness or a lack internally with an external means, with a relationship. And that relationship never ends up being fulfilling, and certainly probably not working, and maybe even abusive and toxic. So we need to get our internal right instead of spending so much time focused on the external and what job we have and how much money we have and how we look and how our life appears. We want to spend our time and our energy and our effort cleaning up the inside and doing our emotional hygiene. And I will tell you, the outside just takes care of itself. It really, really, really does. Jesus said, if the root is healthy, the tree will be healthy. If the root is corrupt or diseased, so will be the tree. So we need to focus on the root, the internal reality of what's really going on. And I'm not talking about spiritually bypassing. I'm talking about really being at peace, not faking or pretending to be joyful or happy when you're dying inside, but to actually have the grace and the righteousness and the peace and the joy, so much so that you can give it away to others. Okay, so suppression and repression is how we fill up the toxic tank. Suppression is denial. It's the refusal to acknowledge a feeling. I talked very, very, very extensively in 2 episodes just prior to this about forgiveness. And that is the acknowledgement of a feeling and the decision to let it go, and then to receive the higher heaven's perspective on that issue or that person. So denial results in major emotional and maturational blocks and delays. Because of guilt, shame, and fear, we deny a feeling's presence and project it onto the people and the world and the situations around us. We experience the feeling, but from our own perspective, not from our own perspective. We experience it as if it belonged to them or that institution, or, we project it off onto somebody else or something else. It is the impetus for blame. Denying a feeling, denying your true inner reality is the impetus for blame. And the mind searches for justification to reinforce the projection. This is where bias and racism happens, because when you have, and it's generational. This stuff can run in bloodlines. We'll have to do another episode on that sometime. But when you have a belief that X group is responsible for your suffering, let's use Nazi Germany so as to avoid anything that's super hot and sensitive right now in our own culture. Let's use Nazi Germany. How did Hitler get the German people, good Christian Lutheran German people, to agree to turn in their Jewish neighbors for torture and extermination? Well, he convinced them that they were the source, the Jews were the source of their economic woes and problems. And so when that belief was conditioned into them, then they were searching for justification to reinforce their projection. And that's how you can marginalize an entire people group. So this happens on the micro, yes, all the time, but it also happens on the macro. What I see, what I deal with constantly in my own practice is women who think men are a certain way, and they are deeply offended by men. That's just men. A man did that, or that's how men are. And it's maybe how a man was, but it's not how an entire category of people are. But when you don't do your internal work, when you don't do the emotional hygiene of forgiveness, so you can live in integrity, you can form these strongholds of belief that are absolutely poisonous and toxic, and they poison relationships, and they lead to all kinds of suffering in individual lives, but as well in countries and globally. So, with denial, we place blame on people, places, institutions, food, climatic conditions, astrological events, social conditions, fate, God, luck, the devil, foreigners, the president, ethnic groups, political rivals, anything outside of ourselves and outside of our control. Because if it's inside of your control, then you have what? Responsibility. So if you can get it outside of your realm of control, then you're not responsible and you don't have to feel shame. Okay. So most of the suffering in the human condition is caused by projection: wars, strife, civil disorder, hating the enemy, social breakdown, attacks, violence, aggression, and every form of destruction is caused by projection and blame. So that is suppression and repression. That's one way that we handle our feelings. The next one is escape. So this is classic numbing behavior, and it's the avoidance of feelings through diversion or distraction. And this is absolutely prevalent in our society. So alcohol, food, shopping, sex, exercise, workaholism, social media, entertainment, work, pornography, all of these things are ways to escape your internal state. And what I see so often that absolutely breaks my heart is people focusing on the addiction, trying to modify their behavior without clearing out the toxic tank that is the actual root of their behavior and their choices, and the unbearable feelings that they're trying to escape from with that addiction. And it never, ever, ever works. And their lives end up becoming unmanageable and destroyed by their behavior because they're focused on their behavior and they're not focused on the emotional roots. So escape is socially condoned. And if you don't believe me, this is one of the things that personally I had to deal with in my life several years ago when I was facing really telling the truth and living in integrity where my marriage was concerned, that my marriage was failing, and that my home environment was absolutely miserable. I was miserable. And I didn't want to face it because if I faced it, then I had to do something about it. So what did I do? I drank wine just about every single night. Not necessarily a lot, some nights more than others, but it would take the edge off of that so that I didn't have to feel what was true. And this is socially condoned. How many times do you go on social media and be like, mommy needs her glass of wine? Or you see other people, like, I deserve some wine, or they even have a wine called mommy juice. And instead of looking for something that's going to numb us or help us escape from our feelings, being in integrity means telling the truth about what's really going on, facing it and dealing with it so that the inside can match the outside. So these escape and numbing mechanisms become addictions. It's a progression. It's a spectrum. They become addictions. If you keep doing them, you'll grow independence on them until you can't do without them. Smartphones are a real scourge in our society, I believe, because people are constantly programmed by the information pouring into them because they're terrified to sit with themselves and be alone with themselves and to face themselves. So we have this thing that we can just, like if I have 5 minutes stopped at a red light, not even 5 minutes, if I have a minute and a half stopped at a red light, what do? I pull out my smartphone, or I'm always listening to a song or a podcast. And I'm well aware of the irony of what I just said. I'm glad you're here listening to the podcast, but I hope that this podcast is actually leading you to get away from escapism and really begin to face yourself and deal with what is there and come into wholeness and completeness and integrity in that. Enormous amounts of energy are expended to keep down the pressure from suppressed and repressed emotions. So we have a progressive loss of awareness and arrestive growth. I can't tell you how many women that I talk to in their 40s and their 50s, and they're just like, I'm numb. I can't enjoy anything. I can't feel anything. I have lost. It's like you lose your spark, and there's nothing to look forward to, and the things that give you pleasure used to give you pleasure don't. And so you don't have to be in your 40s or 50s. It's just kind of the midlife crisis is sort of the thing. It's kind of the time frame where that's common, but you don't it can happen in your 20s. It can happen whenever, because you just become aware that you can't feel anything anymore, because you have been suppressing and escaping your emotions for so long that you lose the skill of actually feeling and experiencing life. And what do when you go to a doctor? This is what happens in our culture. You go to a doctor and you say, I have lost my interest in doing activities that used to give me pleasure. What do they give you? They give you an antidepressant. And that actually does what? It numbs your feelings further and reinforces this cycle and doesn't solve any problems. It just creates a lot more problems. We are medicating away our humanity in this country, because instead of dealing with the problem of how we got where we are with our emotions, we are taking medication to further really solidify that pattern. It's also a loss of creative energy and authentic interest in others. And this is really sad, where we see the arts declining in our society, and we see personal interaction and community declining. And it's all rooted, you can look at smartphones and you can look at technology, but what's behind it? What's the thing behind the thing? What's the root cause of that behavior? Well, it's escaping your feelings. So it's also the opposite of truth. Okay, so when we think about our concept of integrity, the opposite of truth is a lie. Okay, so those are easy to spot. The opposite of truth is a lie, and you can usually, like, the sky is green. No, it's not. It's blue. But for our purposes, the opposite of truth, for integrity is concerned, is actually manipulation. And this can be a lot more subtle, because manipulation is how we get out of integrity. We try to manipulate other people so that we try to manipulate other people's responses, their thoughts and their behaviors and their opinions out of our own fear. And it's usually around rejection. So manipulation can be overt or covert. So manipulation, overt manipulation is do this or I will punish you. Covert manipulation is maybe like the withholding of information or the telling of a half-truth, maybe. So what does this have to do with how we deal with our feelings? Well, let me give you a scenario that plays out in millions of homes every single day, or relationships. So the man does something that makes the woman mad. She gets angry and she clams up and is silent. And so he says, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." So what has she done? First of all, she's suppressing a feeling. Secondly, she's manipulating. So silent treatment is manipulation. And so when you find yourself trying to get a response out of somebody, when you find yourself modifying your own experience by trying to modify their experience to avoid an unpleasant feeling, you're out of integrity. So truth is the solution to that. Telling the truth, coming into integrity, is the solution to that. The whole truth, nothing but the truth, without manipulation. Ladies, that means when your man upsets you, or when he does something that causes a feeling, that you do your emotional hygiene and you say, what am I feeling right now? What am I feeling? I'm feeling scared that he isn't paying me attention. Maybe he's not attracted to me anymore. And like you really get curious and you face that, and you have the conversation and you ask what you need, because you can't heal it if you don't feel it. And it happens internally first, but then you bring that truth to relationships. And this is how you actually build trust, by being vulnerable. There's a lot of talk about vulnerability being thanks to the work of Brene Brown, vulnerability being the antidote to shame. Well, integrity is the antidote to manipulation. Truth is the antidote to manipulation. And vulnerability is made possible when you tell the truth about what you're feeling, not only to yourself and face it, but also to the person who you're in relationship. So the first step in the forgiveness framework is the acknowledgement. So it's, I feel scared, I feel angry, I feel resentful, I feel whatever it is that you feel. And then you are able from that point to make some further progress. And you can go back and review the forgiveness framework in the episode before this. So I have a little tool that you can use, and it's the truth test. So the truth test is when you start thinking or speaking about consequences or limiters of the truth, you have crossed over into manipulation. And this is what I mean by that. If I am the woman in the scenario that I painted earlier, and I'm mad because he was late home from work, and so I clam up and I'm just, going around the house a little sassy, but he says, is everything okay? I'm fine. So in this case, you are telling that you're fine, but you aren't fine. But maybe you're listening to the Rise to Reign podcast and you think, okay, that's not true. I'm going to get honest with my feelings. So what am I feeling? I'm feeling scared that he doesn't want to be with me. He doesn't want to come home, and I want him to want to come home, but he isn't. And so I'm afraid that he doesn't want to be with me, that I'm not important to him. And so you get honest with your feelings around this, and you think, okay, I need to share this with him. But then you think, but what if he rejects me? Or what if he doesn't listen to me? And so in that space right there, you've crossed over into manipulation. When you start thinking or speaking about the consequences or limiters of the truth, you cross over into manipulation. I have a saying that I say all the time. I don't remember where I heard it, but it's so, so, so profound. Everything after the but is bull crap. So we'll keep it PG. Everything after the but is bull crap. So I really don't want to serve on that committee, but if I don't, then they'll, kick me off of that committee. Or so when you start thinking about the limiters or the consequences, you're out of integrity. It's, I really don't want to serve on that committee, period. Okay? So somebody comes to your door and they're like, hey, can I borrow a cup of sugar? And in your mind, you think, well, I only have a cup of sugar and I need that for myself, but maybe she'll think I'm selfish. Nope, you're not. You're out of integrity. So I'm coming up with these examples on the fly. I mean, a cup of sugar is not that important, but I want you to see that when your first reaction, when you have that first reaction, that's the truth. That's an integrity, and you need to put a period after it. No is a full sentence. When we get to boundaries, this piece is going to be really, really, really important, because you have to stop thinking about limiters or consequences and live in the truth in order to be emotionally intelligent and emotionally mature, and actually to get in touch with your feelings and acknowledge them and live in the light. Excuses and justifications are also manipulation. So when you find limiters or consequences of the truth, often they're in the form of justification and excuses. So keep an eye out for those. And again, this is all going to get really robust when we start talking about the categories, because we get to apply them to actual real life scenarios and categories of your life and see how they play out. But for now, I've got some questions. So you've got the truth test, which is when you start thinking or speaking about consequences or limiters of the truth, you've crossed over into manipulation. So to activate this, I've got a couple of questions for you. But first, I want to give you a challenge. This week, when you're talking to people, having conversations, interacting, just pay attention to how many times you think or say the word but. And then do a sentence diagram, if you remember those from elementary school, where you say what was on the first half of the before the but and what was after the but, and see if I'm not right. See if what is after the but isn't an excuse, a justification, or some type of limiter or consequence, and therefore a manipulation. So 3 questions. What is true about this situation? How do I truly feel? And what is needed? What needs to happen based on these truths? What is true about this situation? How do I truly feel? What is needed based on these truths? So in the situation where the husband came home late, that's what's true. That's all that's true. You don't know where he was. You don't know what he was doing. You certainly don't know the mental and emotional process behind that situation. And that's usually where we go, is to motives and to his feelings or to the other party's feelings, and we decide what that is for them. So what is just really true? What is the basic trueness of the situation? And then how do you really feel? How do you really feel? And then based on these truths, what is needed in the situation to tell the truth and nothing but the truth in every situation, and help yourself become emotionally whole and emotionally complete. That's our concept of integrity, is coming to a place where the inside matches the outside. So I'm not boiling inside with a pasted smile on my face. It's like, as women, we are almost indoctrinated into this in our life. Like, I'm smiling on the outside, but inside I'm, raging, or I'm sad, but I just have a big smile on my face because no, I can't handle my feelings and nobody else can handle my realness. So we want the outside to match the inside. That doesn't mean that we want you throwing a big fat ragey fit. It means that we want you to have peace on the inside so that you can have peace on the outside, and you can bring peace and stability and righteousness and joy into every situation. So integrity is the truth. It is the outside matching the inside. And that is it for this episode of the Rise to Reign podcast. Remember, God wants you healed so you can wholeheartedly live your purpose and love your life. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.